Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly past the vermilion walls of the Forbidden City, beneath a haze of lantern light and the distant rustle of silk. The air smells faintly of incense and old cedar. Stone lions stare down from their pedestals as you step onto the worn bricks of a courtyard the size of a small village. You're not a visiting dignitary, not a general, not a noble. You're something stranger, something quieter. You are a eunuch of Imperial China. In this vast palace complex with over 9,000 rooms, the silence is misleading. Power hums under every breath. You've given up everything to be here, and you're about to find out what that sacrifice gets you in return. Spoiler, it's not peace and quiet. Oh, and by the way, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing our sleepy little map fill in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Forbidden City is more than a palace. It's a machine. Its gears are not bronze and iron, but protocol, flattery, and secrets. And you newcomer are one of those gears now. You shuffle through gate after gate, past marble balustrades carved with dragons and phoenixes, toward your quarters. The older eunuchs barely glance at you, their faces unreadable beneath flat silk caps. You're in a compound of men without hairs, lives rewritten and renamed. Outside, the city buzzes. Rickshaws clatter down alleys, vendors shout about dumplings and duck. But within these walls, time feels different. It's slowed, polished, like lacquer over ancient wood. Historians still argue whether the Forbidden City's layout was meant to spiritually purify the emperor or just confuse invaders. Either way, it certainly confuses you. You pass the Gate of Supreme Harmony, the Hall of Mental Cultivation, and a few suspiciously identical courtyards that make you wonder if you've accidentally looped. Your room is shared, naturally. Privacy isn't a currency here. In the dim lamplight, you see your new roommate's one humming to himself as he folds robes with military precision, another writing verses by candlelight, probably poetry, though it could be a complaint disguised in metaphor. Both look up, nod politely, then return to their tasks. Everyone knows that too much curiosity is dangerous. That first night, the silence is louder than you'd imagined. You can hear someone coughing 2 rooms over. The bells marking the hours. A sudden screech of peacocks from the Imperial aviary. And you lie there, wondering, what now? Well, now begins your training. Not in martial arts or philosophy, though you'll get a little of those, but in walking. Yes, walking. One does not simply stomp past the Son of Heaven. Your gait is corrected, your posture critiqued, your bow rehearsed, until it feels like part of your spine. You learn how to carry tea, roll scrolls, and speak in a voice just deferential enough. You're also introduced to the ledger room. It's less exciting than it sounds. Rows of bamboo slips, silk, bound records, and stern overseers. Here, you copy names, taxes, and orders. Mistakes are punished. Not loudly, but with reassignment. You do not want to be reassigned to the latrine fires. Still, even amid all this monotony, a few things stand out. You hear whispers about a eunuch who controls the emperor's seal. Another who's amassed a private library, bigger than most scholars could dream of. And one who vanished, just gone, after being caught smuggling love letters. Or maybe it was opium. Or gold. The story changes depending on who's whispering. One fringe detail, barely acknowledged in official records. Some eunuchs reportedly trained in martial arts by night. Not for self-defense, but for ritual. Slow, flowing forms meant to align the body and spirit. Or maybe just to keep joints from stiffening after hours of kneeling on cold stone. Eventually, you're granted a minor post attending the Imperial laundry. Not glamorous, but important. Empress robes must not fade, wrinkle, or smell of the wrong flowers. Jasmine for spring, osmanthus for fall. You learn the weight of silks, the slipperiness of brocade, and the social hierarchy even among undergarments. One day, as you fold a particularly stubborn sash, you glimpse him the emperor. Briefly, a flash of yellow robe, a low procession of bowed heads. You freeze, not in awe, but in protocol. You're not allowed to see him technically. But you do, and it feels oddly normal. The palace changes you. Not just your status, your name, or your schedule. Your voice changes. You start talking like the others. Soft, clipped, exact. Your dreams, when you have them, are full of doors that never quite open. And yet, you start to feel a strange calm. The rhythms of court life, maddening at first, become familiar. You memorize the sequence of bells. You learn which cook sneaks extra meatballs, which clerk reads banned poetry, which guard will trade gossip for rice wine. And deep down, you start to realize something odd. This place isn't just a prison. It's a ladder. And you've just put your foot on the first rung. Morning stumbles in beneath a dimming moon. The courtyard glistens with dew, and your breath makes little clouds as you rush to the bathhouse before the pipes clog again. You've been here just long enough to stop wincing every time someone mentions the knife. But the story of how you got here is never far from your mind. Let's not sugarcoat it. Becoming a eunuch hurts, not just metaphorically. The procedure that defines your new life is as brutal as it is final. A small, dark room. A quick incision with a dull blade. A brick to bite down on. Some don't survive. Some bleed for days. And afterward, there's the chance of infection, fever, or worse. Those horror stories you pretend not to know. The tool used. A curved knife, sometimes shaped like a sickle. Sometimes nothing more than a sharpened shard. A small wooden plug to keep the wound from sealing too soon. Recovery meant crouching, alone, in silence. They say the real pain came later. Not from the wound, but from the change. Your voice, your strength, your very sense of self, altered. Why would anyone choose this? Well, here's the uncomfortable truth. It wasn't always a choice. For some, it was punishment. For others, a last resort. But many, especially in later dynasties, volunteered. You'd hand over a note, sometimes signed by your family, and sometimes sealed in blood. Poverty made eunuchdom look like an escape route. 3 meals a day, a roof over your head, and the whisper of power. Not bad if your other options were starving or dying in a rice paddy. Historians still argue whether families were pressured, bribed, or simply desperate. And then there were the fakes. Yes, some men faked the cut, tied themselves up, paid off officials, or bribed doctors. Risky business. One slip, and you'd find yourself genuinely snipped and possibly executed. Still, the rewards were tempting. The Forbidden City offered not just security, but influence. A eunuch in the right position could become a gatekeeper to the emperor himself. You remember the day it happened to you. The walk to the clinic, the way your legs felt like wood. The old man who nodded, unsmiling, and said, "Lie down." You don't remember much after that. Just waking up on straw, tasting iron in your mouth, and realizing your life had just been split in two. Oddly enough, there's a whole folklore around eunuch transformation. In some provinces, families offered prayers to gods of mercy. In others, they threw a feast. And there was always a burial, yes, of the removed parts. The treasures, as some called them, were sometimes pickled, jarred, and buried with you after death. Bit grim, but hey, closure's important. A few fringe tales say that certain alchemists believed eunuchs lived longer. Something about preserved essence and lack of worldly distraction. There's no real science behind that, of course, but it might explain why some emperors preferred eunuch advisors, less likely to be distracted by family ambitions, more loyal to the throne. Or so the logic went. Still, power was never guaranteed. For every eunuch who rose high, a dozen more scrubbed chamber pots in silence until their joints gave out. You start to hear the stories, passed mouth to ear like contraband. One man who whispered something wrong in the wrong room. Another who laughed during a ceremony and was reassigned to the ice storage. The palace keeps you busy, You run errands through covered corridors, always yielding to higher ranks. You learn to bow mid-step, to deliver messages without reading them, and to recognize every shade of annoyance on a supervisor's face. Progress isn't about shouting. It's about surviving long enough to be noticed. And then there's the name change. Your old name? Gone. You're now Little Lou, or JD Scribe, or some other clipped label. It's supposed to be respectful, but you feel like a character in someone else's play. Names here are more than titles, they're shields. If you're clever, you'll find a way to hide behind yours. One of your roommates, let's call him Plum Inc., was castrated at 8. Doesn't remember much else. He's been here longer than most of the furniture and knows everything. Where the best tea is brewed. Which minister's niece keeps sneaking out. How to fake illness without getting caught. You decide to stick close to Plum Inc. It's like choosing a tour guide for a very confusing afterlife. One evening, over bean paste buns, he says, "You know the emperor's favorite concubine. She trusts only one servant." Guess what he is? You raise an eyebrow. Her childhood playmate became a eunuch just to stay near her? Romantic, You can't tell if he's mocking you or just tired. Probably both. Not all eunuchs are sad, though. Some seem genuinely serene. They've made peace with their role, embraced the rituals, even found joy in their duties. You envy them. You're not there yet. Maybe someday. As the days slide by, you stop flinching at shadows. You start to hear the rhythm behind the ritual, the song behind the silence. You no longer feel like a guest here. You belong, if only by process of elimination. Late at night, when the palace finally sleeps, you sometimes sneak onto a balcony and stare at the stars. It's the only part of the sky not claimed by hierarchy. And as the wind lifts the hem of your robe, you wonder, not sadly, just curiously, who you might have been if things had gone differently. The sun isn't up yet, but the palace already is. You rise with aching joints, and yesterday's dust still clinging to your robe. There's no time for dawdling. Today, you've been reassigned. Not demoted, not promoted, just shifted. Welcome to the Ministry of Cleaning Affairs, unofficially known as Mop Heaven. You now sweep the same 100 feet of flagstone every morning. Slowly, precisely, like the floor is sacred scripture. And in a way, it is. The Emperor's path must gleam. It must shimmer, even before his shoes touch it. Miss a spot, and someone will notice. Probably that guy from the Hall of Military Might with the eyebrow mole, and a vendetta against people who whistle. But here's the thing no one tells you. Power in the palace doesn't just fall from the heavens. It drips, quietly, from mop handles and teacups and scrolls. Every eunuch who ever became someone started exactly where you are. Overlooked, overworked, and under suspicion. Plum Inc. sees your reassignment as an opportunity. A front courtyard, he says, nodding with mock reverence. You'll be near the eastern chamber now. Prime gossip real estate. And he's right. The eastern chamber is where mid-tier ministers lounge, complain, and, crucially, forget that the cleaning staff has ears. You learn things just by being quiet. Who's angling for a promotion, who's bribing the silk traders, who cried during the dragon parade because the emperor didn't wave at them. One day, while scrubbing a step that hasn't been truly clean since the Yuan dynasty, you hear a name, Eunuch Gao. The tone makes you pause. Not derision. Respect. Maybe even fear. Zhao was once a mop handler too, they say now. He controls who sees the emperor's daily schedule. One word from him, and you vanish from court life like a dumpling in duck soup. You start listening more carefully. Every time his name is mentioned, the air tightens. Historians still argue whether Zhao was a manipulative tyrant or a stabilizing force in a chaotic court. Depends on who's writing the scrolls, and whether they survive to finish them. You eventually earn your own corner of the corridor. A small patch of marble that shines because you made it shine. A supervisor notices. He doesn't smile, but he does grunt and give you a slightly better broom. That's progress. And then it happens. A visitor slips on wet stone. Not just any visitor, a cousin of a concubine, fluttering past with 6 attendants and an ego the size of Inner Mongolia. The fall is spectacular. She shrieks, silk flies, and a peach tumbles dramatically from her sleeve. You rush to help her, of course, not because you care, but because Plum Ink told you. Always be first to apologize, even if you did nothing. Especially then. She glares, says something about clumsiness, and is gone. But the next day, you're called into a different office. Bigger windows, softer slippers. A eunuch with silver, threaded robes hands you a note. You've been transferred. Again, welcome to personal services. This department doesn't scrub or sweep. It attends. You pour tea. You arrange calligraphy brushes. You prep ceremonial robes. And, if you're very, very lucky, you hold the emperor's mirror while he examines his beard. That day comes sooner than expected. You're summoned to the outer dressing chamber. The air smells of musk and orchid. You keep your eyes down, hands steady. And then, for a breathless moment, you're holding a polished bronze mirror while the son of heaven adjusts his hat. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't need to. But you're close enough to hear him sigh. Close enough to see a small scar near his temple. Not something you'd expect. Not something you'll mention. Afterward, one of his attendants nods at you. Just once. But it means something. A week later, you're dressing one of his robes. Silk the color of autumn wheat, embroidered with clouds and cranes. You handle it like it's alive. Word spreads. You're careful, they say. Trustworthy. No scandals. No opinions. Perfect. A fringe tradition you stumble upon. Some older eunuchs believe in robe whispering. Not just folding garments, but reading them. They claim the way a robe creases can predict the mood of the wearer. You're skeptical. Until one morning, a robe refuses to hang right, and the emperor skips court entirely. By now, you've stopped calling yourself unlucky. You might even feel, quietly, cautiously, ambitious. You start staying later. Volunteering for the boring tasks. Asking the older eunuchs just the right questions. You think too much? Plum Ink tells you one evening, slurping broth. That's dangerous. You nod, then ask him if he knows anything about Gao's early years. He stares for a long moment. Maybe. But that's a tale for after dumplings. You're deep in the linen vaults, cataloging ceremonial sashes for the spring equinox. When it clicks, there's a pattern to how eunuchs rise through the ranks. Not random, not luck. Just quiet specialization. You're not here just to survive, you're here to become indispensable. Welcome to the many hidden careers of Imperial eunuchs. Spy, scribe, seamstress. You can't do everything, but you'd better get very, very good at something. Let's start with scribes. Eunuchs who master brush and ink often find themselves in the hall of literary brilliance. Copying edicts, ghostwriting poems, or editing official histories with just enough flair to flatter. Their handwriting becomes a form of currency. Get your scroll noticed? That's influence. Misplace a comma. That's a flogging. You consider applying, but Plum Ink scoffs. You write like a drunken rooster, he says. Try textiles. So you do? The Imperial Textile Bureau is quieter than you expect. Fewer whispers, more counting. Rolls of brocade, stacks of embroidered phoenixes, silk dyed with real indigo. You learn to spot a loose thread from 10 paces. You're told never to wrinkle the dragon's whiskers. And for heaven's sake, never fold a robe during an eclipse. There's a strange comfort in the repetition. Each garment is a puzzle fold, a line, press offer. You almost forget what they're for. Until one day, you dress a robe bound for beheading. Bright red. Reserved for noble executions. You don't ask questions. You just hand over the box. But maybe you're not a robe guy either. Maybe your real calling lies in surveillance. Yes, palace espionage is a job, and eunuchs are perfectly positioned for it. You're everywhere, yet invisible. You fetch tea for ministers, pour wine for generals, fan concubines. Who better to overhear a plot? Some eunuchs specialize in reporting. Discreet notes folded into hollow brush handles. Hidden messages tucked in steam buns. You learn the signals. A dropped fan means danger. A misplaced hairpin means safe. Once, you hear of a eunuch who signaled a coup by sneezing in a temple. Historians still argue whether the famed Eunuch 3, a trio who allegedly prevented an assassination during the Ming Dynasty, were real or just court gossip inflated to legend. But the records suggest someone was listening behind every door. And then there are the artists, eunuchs who paint, compose, choreograph. The palace requires endless beauty dances for festivals, tunes for rituals, murals for pavilions. You meet one, a slender man who goes by Crane Brush. He sings while sketching peonies and claims to have designed 3 of the Empress's hairpins. Possibly true, possibly madness. Music, he tells you, is the one thing the Emperor cannot order. So he hires it. A fringe fact from Crane Brush: some eunuchs train doves to carry messages between pavilions. Not pigeons. Doves. Pure white. Less suspicion. Also, prettier poop, apparently. You start to see how every eunuch builds a niche. Some tend gardens, some organize banquets, some specialize in etiquette law, so obscure even Confucius would raise an eyebrow. Each one carving out just enough identity to survive. And there's rivalry, of course. Soft smiles, hard stares. One eunuch accidentally rearranges a shrine. Another misfiles a consort's birthday scroll. That's not a mistake. That's war. One day, you're summoned to serve tea during a strategy meeting. Not military strategy, festival logistics. Which pavilion gets how many lanterns? Which musician plays which note? You pour tea silently, but you're listening. Someone laughs. Someone else mutters something about plum wine instead of peach. And then, casually, one minister says, "Check with the robe clerk. He's fast." They're talking about you. Just like that, your name's in circulation. Not famous. Not feared. But known. That's the first step toward becoming more than a shadow. That night, Plumink pulls you aside. You're moving too fast. You frown. Isn't that the point? Maybe. Just don't forget the taller the candle, the faster it burns. You nod. But you also stay an hour later than usual, straightening scrolls in the scribe chamber, just in case someone notices. Eventually, you're invited to an informal supper. A rare honor. 10 eunuchs, 6 dishes, and one very quiet musician plucking a zither in the corner. The talk is all coded. The lake is cloudy this year. Might mean someone's been bribed. Lotus paste too sweet. Means someone's pushing for an early retirement. You don't speak much, but you watch who laughs. Who doesn't? By now, you've begun to shape your own specialty. Fast, quiet, meticulous. A robe folder, scroll runner, tea pourer who never asks questions but always delivers on time. You're not flashy. You're useful. And in this place, that's worth more than gold. Sometimes you catch a reflection in a polished bowl and barely recognize yourself. Not just thinner, older, sharper. Your eyes scan, your ears filter, your hands move without hesitation. You're not just surviving anymore. You're becoming someone. Dawn breaks like a secret, slow and reluctant, over the rooftops of the forbidden city. You're already moving, your footsteps soundless over marble, as you make your way to one of the most delicate posts a eunuch can hold the Emperor's mourning chamber. This is no ordinary duty. You are one of the select few now trusted to be present at the very beginning of the Son of Heaven's day. Your task seems simple. Boil water, set robes, whisper the time. But it places you so close to power you can feel its heat. Literally, the Emperor's sleeping quarters are warmed by braziers that never go cold. The doors to the inner palace open with a sigh, and you glide through silk curtains into a hush thick enough to bottle. The Emperor doesn't speak right away. He stretches, sips a small cup of tea. Oolong, barely steeped. And for a few quiet minutes, you are part of his world. A world most subjects couldn't imagine, let alone survive. There are rhythms to his mornings. First the mirror. He inspects himself in silence, noting a stray hair or a wrinkle like a battlefield general. Then the calendar, a massive wooden tablet carried by another eunuch, listing auspicious hours, meetings, and sacrifices. And finally, the audience roster. Who gets to speak today, and for how long? You learn quickly, never hand the emperor anything with your bare hands. Always bow at a 30-degree angle. 40 is groveling, 20 is disrespect. And above all, don't breathe too loud when he's reading. Sometimes he says nothing. Other times, he mutters lines from old poems or makes strange requests. Have the ducks from Lake Tai cooked with pier this week. Find me the astronomer who said the moon would be full yesterday. Is it true that fireflies don't sleep? You nod, you record. You don't answer unless asked. But being present in these moments teaches you something rare. The emperor is human. Tired, curious, prone to stubbed toes, and bad moods like everyone else. This knowledge is both empowering and dangerous. Because now you understand, beneath all the ritual, he's just a man. A man everyone else is terrified of disappointing. Historians still argue whether the emperor was a prisoner of his own court or the ultimate master of it. But as you watch him adjust a too tight sash with visible irritation, you suspect it's both. You begin to notice the other mourning eunuchs, each with their own flavor of caution. Cricket, a tiny man with oversized sleeves, handles incense like it's sacred fire. Stone Ice has been here so long no one remembers his real name. He says nothing ever, but once winked at you when the emperor sneezed and knocked over a scroll. Being here also means brushing elbows with the concubines. Well, not literally. You rarely see them. Just flashes of color behind lacquered screens, laughter trailing down corridors, perfume cloud that lingers long after they pass. But you hear stories. Which one sings? Which one writes riddles? Which one supposedly commands the emperor with a glance? Once, you deliver a set of fresh robes and catch a whisper of song behind a curtain. High, lilting, sad. You freeze, not because it's forbidden, but because it's beautiful. Then a shadow shifts and you're gone before anyone sees. There's a fringe tradition in the palace. Each concubine is assigned a primary attendant eunuch, not for intimacy, don't be ridiculous, but for rituals, letters, errands, and occasionally comfort. Emotional comfort. Many of these relationships outlast the affairs themselves. Some become deep bonds. Others explode. One tale you overhear, a eunuch who dared correct a concubine's poem. She had him reassigned to the stables. He now talks to horses more than people. Your own routine stabilizes. You arrive before dawn, prepare the morning, and slip away before the real chaos begins. No one thanks you. But no one reprimands you either. That's practically a standing ovation. One morning, the emperor pauses as you pour his tea. He looks at you, not through you, and says, "You've done this before. You bow. Many times, your majesty." Good. A beat. What was the weather like yesterday? You freeze. That's not your department. You guess, sunny, probably. He nods. Correct. Then turns away. That's it. But afterward, the chief attendant pats your shoulder. Once. That's worth 10 promotions. You begin keeping your own notes. Coded, of course. What tea the emperor prefers when he's irritable. Which robes mean he's anticipating a military report. You're building a profile, not out of ambition, but survival. Because the closer you get, the higher the stakes. One mistake here, and you won't be reassigned. You'll be erased. Plumbing starts calling you. Sunrise. A joke, since you always leave before the sun's fully up. Sunrise sees everything but never burns, he says. You kind of like it. At night, you sit by the garden pond, letting your reflection shimmer next to the koi. You think about the emperor's sigh, about the sound of silk brushing tile, about how strange it is that a person like you, disfigured, discarded, invisible, can become so essential. You're not just a shadow anymore. You are part of the morning itself. The further you rise, the less you say. That's the rule. Not because you've run out of words, but because each syllable becomes riskier. Silence, you've come to learn, is the most useful tool in a eunuch's belt, right next to discretion and a really good memory. Today, you're sent to the archives, not the public ones. Those are for scholars and ministers with perfectly clean fingernails. No, you're bound for the sealed vaults, scrolls behind scrolls, ledgers behind locks. These are the records only a few may touch, and even fewer may quote. The room is colder than it should be, even in summer. Shelves rise like cliffs, filled with silk, bound volumes that crackle when moved. It smells of bamboo, ink, and quiet ambition. Your new supervisor is a man named Iron Brush, not because of his handwriting, which is actually lovely, but because once, allegedly, he threw an iron brush across the room and hit a lying accountant square in the forehead. He never confirms the story, but he never denies it either. Your job is basic reshelve, dust, update index slips. But quickly, you realize how much more is hidden here. These documents don't just list taxes or census records. They track the emperor's dreams. They note omens. They correct genealogies. They revise history. Here's a secret: not everything carved in stone started out that way. Sometimes, a battle described as a tactical retreat was actually a disaster. A marriage listed as auspicious might have ended in arsenic. And yes, sometimes names vanish, erased with delicate ink, rewritten with even more delicate lies. You handle a scroll about a provincial rebellion, only it never happened. Officially. Yet here it is, complete with dates and body counts. For internal review only, the margin notes say, you roll it with hands that tremble slightly less than they used to. Historians still argue whether eunuchs exaggerated their role in managing these archives. But the truth is, if you control the records, you shape the narrative. And if you shape the narrative, you shape power. The scroll room has rules. 1. Never speak of what you read. 2. Never ask why a scroll is missing. 3. If a document is marked with a phoenix stamp, do not open it. That's the Empress's domain. And even Iron Brush won't cross that threshold. One of the fringe tales you hear is about a eunuch named Mirror Leaf, who once found a scroll revealing a concubine's secret affair. Instead of reporting it, he returned it upside down. A signal to whoever was watching. A week later, the scroll disappeared entirely. Mirror Leaf was promoted. The affair was never mentioned again. Your own work is less dramatic, but occasionally illuminating. You reference birthdays, death dates, supply shipments. Once, you discover a discrepancy in the number of horses fed at a northern garrison. When you report it, nothing happens. But 3 days later, the officer in charge of that garrison is quietly reassigned. Coincidence? You think not. The archives are also home to ghost scrolls. Entries with no listed author, no origin date, no official seal. They're stored in a drawer marked unresolved. One lists a prophecy involving a red bird, a cracked jade bowl, and the fall of a dynasty. You don't mention it to anyone, but you copy the text on a scrap of your own and hide it under your mat. Why? Not sure. Maybe you just like the way it sounds. You meet other archivists. Drifting Brush, who never makes eye contact. Lantern Ice, who can recite any record from the past 40 years. And Paper Bell, a eunuch who insists every archive room is haunted. Too much memory, he says, tapping his temple. Not enough forgetting. The Emperor visits the archives exactly once during your tenure. He doesn't speak, just walks, nods, and points to one shelf. Iron Brush retrieves a scroll. The Emperor reads it, grunts, and leaves. You're not sure what it meant. But that scroll never returns. At night you dream in ink, in lines and margins, in questions with no punctuation. One evening, as you're locking the scroll drawers, Iron Brush speaks for the first time in hours. You're not terrible at this, he says. Which, from him, is basically a proposal of friendship. You nod. Thank you. Don't get comfortable, he adds. Comfort leads to mistakes, but you are comfortable. In a strange, chilly, parchment-scented way, You like knowing things others don't. You like the weight of secret history in your hands. And you especially like that no one yells here. The scrolls don't care who you are, only that you place them gently. Before bed, you write your own note. Not official. Just a thought. Today I touched a story no one will read. And then, you sleep. Steam rolls thick as fog across the kitchen courtyard, curling around the eaves and cloaking your robe in the scent of sizzling oil and 5 spice powder. You're not here for a snack. You've just been assigned to one of the most hectic, aromatic, and absurdly political places in the Forbidden City, the Imperial kitchens. At first glance, it's chaos. Dozens of cooks, each with their own little empire of pots and pans, bark orders and wave ladles like battlefield generals. Soot-blackened scrolls list daily menace. Chickens dangle like grim ornaments from bamboo racks. A junior eunuch sobs quietly into a vat of lotus root because someone overcooked the rice. Welcome to the belly of the beast. You're not here to cook, of course. You're here to coordinate. To relay messages from the top, ensure the right ingredients make it to the right stoves, and above all, to ensure no one accidentally poisons the emperor with the wrong kind of mushroom. The emperor's breakfast alone is a sega congee with duck egg, pickled vegetables from a specific province, 1 pear sliced into exactly 14 segments, and tea that must steep for precisely 37 seconds. Anything off, and someone's head rolls, figuratively, most of the time. Eunuchs in the kitchen wield surprising influence. They know what the emperor likes, what he suddenly doesn't, and which minister's stomach problems are a matter of urgent concern. A dish served too hot, too slow, or with the wrong garnish can delay court meetings, alter moods, even shift policy. Historians still argue whether the famed Spice Rebellion during the Ming Dynasty, a brief standoff over pepper imports, was triggered by court politics or someone slipping chili oil into the wrong soup. Your supervisor is a wary man known as Smoke Palm, who moves like steam and remembers everything. He quizzes you constantly. How many duck eggs per bowl? 3, unless it's winter. Then 2.5. What happens if the Empress gets pork on a fast day? Immediate apology scroll, sent with peonies. He grins. In the kitchen, food is diplomacy. The Emperor's favorite dish this month. Tofu with scallions, shaped into little dragons. Guess who gets promoted if he asks for it again tomorrow? The cook. No. The eunuch who suggested it. You begin to make friends with the pantry clerks, the spice master, even the boy who plucks feathers from live quail. You learn how to smell bad ginger, how to tell when rice wine has turned, how to slice lotus root so thin it could pass as paper. And then there's the banquet season. Oh boy. Dozens of feasts, hundreds of guests, thousands of tiny choices that can ruin your life. Should the duck arrive before the dumplings? Do we risk the crab pudding with the northern envoy? Why is there a fly in the jelly mold? You start sleeping less, dreaming of stewed pork, and reciting herb combinations under your breath like spells. But there's something oddly satisfying about it. For the first time, your decisions have taste. Literally, one fringe tidbit you uncover, some kitchen eunuchs wore rings of different scents, cinnamon, clove, jasmine, to test whether the emperor's food was tainted. If the ring absorbed a foul odor, the dish was tossed. Or the cook was. Depends on the day. Occasionally, you get a real treat leftovers. Not scraps, mind you. Full plates that were prepared for the emperor but never served. Technically forbidden, but everyone pretends not to see when a little dumpling disappears here and there. You once eat a lychee, stuffed duck roll, so exquisite it makes you tear up a little. Then spend the next hour terrified someone saw you. Still, the risks are real. Rumors swirl about a eunuch who tried to sneak a love charm into the Empress's soup. She never drank it, but he vanished anyway. No one says what happened. His shoes, however, were found neatly placed by the well the next morning. Plum Ink visits you one evening. You're becoming a regular 5-flavor eunuch, he jokes. You laugh. Better than bland. Just don't let yourself become sauce. That's what they call it when you get comforting. One day, while prepping for a tea ceremony, you're asked to test a new honey glaze. You hesitate, just a moment. Could be your last meal. You close your eyes. Take a bite. Delicious. And no convulsions. Success. Your reputation grows. People start coming to you for menu suggestions, ingredient approvals, subtle requests. The general likes ginger, but not too much. The concubine in Pavilion 8 needs something settling. You nod, scribble notes, and adjust accordingly. Soon, you're not just a eunuch in the kitchen, you're a consultant. And at night, when the last pot has boiled, the last duck has been trussed, and the last scroll of praise or complaint has been read, you sit on the stone bench outside the smokehouse, your hands still fragrant with star anise, and you think not bad for someone who once couldn't tell soy sauce from vinegar. It's the middle of the lunar month, and tonight the palace glows with the pale shimmer of moonlight slanting through lattice windows. You're not in the kitchens anymore. You're standing beside an altar in the Hall of Ancestral Light, holding a brass incense holder that's heavier than your guilt about that stolen duck bun. You've been drafted into another sacred duty now, religious and ritual services, which, in the Forbidden City, means a very particular blend of candlelight, ghost stories, astrology, and the eerie feeling that something is always watching you. Your role is both essential and, let's face it, deeply weird. Eunuchs are the bridge between the Imperial family and the divine. Why? Because you're pure. No family, no hairs, no distractions. That makes you the perfect vessel for conducting rites to the ancestors, lighting lanterns to pacify spirits, and whispering prayers so old they predate the bricks beneath your feet. This morning, you sprinkled holy water from a jade ladle. This afternoon, you polished a turtle shell used for divination. And tonight, you'll burn offerings made of spirit paper. Little folded houses, horses, and silver coins meant to please the ghosts of emperors past. There's a very strict order of rituals: spring rites, autumn sacrifices, solstice chants, and the monthly moon ceremony, which involves enough incense to fumigate an army of locusts. You learn to chant in monotone, to move in prescribed arcs, to offer fruit in odd numbers only. Historians still argue whether the imperial rites were genuine acts of faith or elaborate performances to maintain political power. Frankly, after chanting the same 6 verses to a bowl of dates while kneeling on rice husks for an hour, you're not sure it matters. Faith or not, the emperor believes in appearances, so you keep kneeling. Your supervisor in this ghostly gig is a man named Quiet Bell. He barely speaks above a whisper and swears he once saw the spirit of the Wanli emperor in the kitchen, eating a pear. You smile politely, but the truth is you've started seeing things, too. Not ghosts. Not really. Just shadows that linger too long. A reflection that isn't yours. The sudden feeling that someone is right behind you. Until you turn around, and it's just a wall. One fringe belief passed among the older eunuchs' garlic. Under your pillow keeps ancestral spirits from whispering to you in dreams. You try it. The dreams stop. Coincidence? Maybe. Another tip: if a candle flares blue during a ceremony, cancel everything. That's a warning. You don't want to know from what? Tonight, you're tasked with assisting at the Jade Gate altar. It's the biggest ritual of the season. Ministers attend in their finest robes. The emperor bows 3 times. A cow is sacrificed, symbolically, not literally, though the raw beef cubes are very real. Your job is to hand over the prayer scrolls in the right order. There are 108 of them, each with precise knots, flourishes, and no room for error. You sweat, you whisper, you nearly drop scroll fair 37, but you make it through. At the end, the emperor's eyes meet yours, just for a second, and he nods. That's more than most gods ever give you. You're not alone in your reverence, either. Even the most cynical eunuchs bow at the family shrines. Even the sarcastic ones pause when walking past the ancestral tombs. Some of them leave snacks, just in case. You hear rumors of ghost shifts, late night rotations no one volunteers for. A concubine once claimed to hear flute music in an empty corridor. Another swore she saw her deceased mother reading a scroll in the West Library. You don't know if any of it's true, but you still knock gently on the spirit doors before entering. One night, you're asked to accompany the Emperor to the Temple of Heaven. It's a big deal, an open air altar where he personally prays for good harvests. You're to carry the ceremonial incense and ensure the wind doesn't blow out the sacred flame. You walk behind him as drums sound and stars wheel overhead. The air is so crisp it bites. The Emperor raises his arms. You feel your own knees tremble, not from fear, but from sheer, staggering reverence. This is theater.
Yes.
But it's also something else, something older. You can't name it, but it curls in your chest like a smoke ring that refuses to fade. Afterward, back in your quarters, Plumink finds you placing oranges on your windowsill. For the ancestors? He asks. You nod? He smiles. Just don't leave pork. Great. Aunt Lynn was vegetarian. You both laugh, softly, because you don't want to wake anything sleeping in the rafters. That night, you sleep with a sprig of mugwort tucked under your pillow. Not because you believe it'll protect you from spirits, but because you're no longer sure you don't. You no longer look people directly in the eye. Not because you're afraid, but because you've learned how much more they'll reveal when they think you're not watching. And these days, there's a lot to watch, because something remarkable is happening. Eunuchs are beginning to rule the realm. Not officially, of course. The Emperor is still the Emperor, seated atop his dragon throne with his thunderous voice and meticulously waxed mustache. But behind the curtain, sometimes literally, it's eunuchs like you who keep the engine running. You're now part of a select inner circle tasked with managing palace logistics, scheduling audiences, and occasionally intercepting messages before they ever reach Imperial ears. It's delicate work steeped in protocol and politesse, but make no mistake, it's power. You've watched Soft Wind, a eunuch barely old enough to tie a sash properly, rise through the ranks because he happens to hold the key to the Emperor's calligraphy study, and Iron Plum, who manages grain shipments, now speaks more often to the Emperor than the Minister of Revenue does. Historians still argue whether eunuchs' influence during this period was a symptom of imperial weakness or simply the byproduct of extreme bureaucracy. Either way, you're living it. Your own responsibilities have expanded. You now oversee a team of junior eunuchs, which means you get blamed for everything, but thanked for nothing. One forgets to bow properly before a visiting envoy. Your fault. Another drops a teacup. Your lapse in training. But you also get to make decisions. Small ones, sure, but decisions nonetheless. And they're watching you. Not just your peers. Ministers. Scribes. Maybe even the Emperor. You've become a name whispered just loud enough to be noticed. The palace is a web, and you're starting to feel the strands tremble when you move. You're invited to your first real strategy meeting. Unofficial, candlelit, held in a side room that smells faintly of old ink and secrets. 6 eunuchs, including you. No records, no titles, just quiet discussion about logistics for the upcoming Imperial tour. You speak last, carefully. But when you do, the others nod. You suggested rerouting the Emperor's trip to avoid a region still recovering from flood. Practical, efficient, kind of boring, which, in the Forbidden City, is a strength. Your influence grows in increments, a thank, you scroll here, a discreet nod there. Soon you're consulted before certain plans are made. You don't decide yet, but your advice carries weight. Plumink raises an eyebrow when he hears. Congratulations, he says. Now you'll be blamed when the Emperor catches a cold. You laugh, but he's not wrong. There's a fringe theory whispered in the archives. The real reason eunuchs rose to power wasn't loyalty. It was proximity. Ministers live outside the palace, commuting through layers of guards and gates. Eunuchs live inside, close to every sigh, every whim, every sleepless night. And now you're one of them. Of course, not everyone's thrilled about this. Some ministers grumble that eunuchs are overstepping, that you've wormed your way into policy discussions, military logistics, even foreign diplomacy. You try to avoid their glares in court. You try to ignore the satirical scrolls depicting eunuchs with grotesque features pulling puppet strings. But you see the signs. More surveillance. More questions. One junior eunuch suddenly reassigned to a remote rice granary. Another found drunk, suspiciously so, and dismissed. You start watching your back. Then comes the turning point. A crisis. A regional uprising in the north. The emperor wants answers. Fast. The ministers bicker. The generals delay, but the eunuchs, you gather, you assess, you propose a supply reroute that relieves pressure without violating protocol. Risky. Bold. Effective. The emperor signs off. Later, he calls you by name. Not eunuch. Not scribe. Your name. You serve well, he says. That night, you barely sleep. Not from excitement, from terror. Because now, everyone knows you've been noticed. And the higher you rise, the further you can fall. Plum Ink finds you sharpening a brush in the dark. You gonna write your memoirs? He jokes. You shake your head. Just thinking. He nods. Don't think too loud. People might hear. Still, you begin to act differently. A little more careful. A little more formal. You stop eating in the main hall. You speak in measured tones. You decline certain invitations. You've seen what happens to ambitious eunuchs who rise too fast. Some are poisoned. Some accused of sorcery. Some simply vanish, their names struck from the records as if they never existed. But you've also seen what's possible. One fringe tale haunts you. A eunuch who built a secret garden, hidden behind the eastern walls, where he planted trees for every decision he regretted. They say the garden bloomed with color, but not a single fruit. You don't want fruit. You want roots. You walk more carefully now. Each step chosen like a chess move. You don't speak unless you must, and when you do, it's in the tone of someone who knows that walls have ears, and that those ears report to 3 different masters. Because here's the thing, power doesn't just attract attention, it attracts enemies. And in the Forbidden City, your enemies don't wear black cloaks or twirl mustaches. They serve soup. They sharpen calligraphy brushes. They walk 2 steps behind you with a smile that never quite reaches their eyes. You've stepped into a world of silk, robed politics where one misplaced bow can cost your position, and one overheard sigh might start a rumor that unravels your career. You're in the game now. And it's not a fair one. Your first real brush with danger starts with something harmless, a compliment. One of the emperor's advisors, a portly man known for his collection of ornamental birds, praises your efficiency during a council meeting, just loud enough for others to hear. 3 days later, someone, accidentally, mixes the scrolls you're supposed to deliver. It nearly results in the emperor reading a treatise on irrigation methods when he was expecting poetry for his concubine's birthday. You catch the mistake in time, but the message is clear. You're being tested. Then there's the tea incident. The emperor complains his cup tastes bitter. You didn't prepare it, but you oversaw the preparation. You're summoned. No yelling, just a slow, unsettling series of questions. What leaves were used? When were they steeped? Who carried the tray? You answer, calmly, precisely, and survive. But you make a note to triple, check every teacup from now on. Plum Ink warns you over dumplings. Enemies in silk robes. He mutters. They bow deeper than friends, and they always know your favorite dish. He's right. The most dangerous enemies you face are eunuchs like you. Ambitious, clever, and aware that there are only so many spots at the top. One, a quiet man named Lotus Step, begins showing up at the same meetings, offering eerily similar suggestions, mirroring your style a little too closely. Another, known as Second silence invites you to share tea and insights. You decline politely. The next day, a rumor surfaces that you once worked as a street performer. Untrue, but embarrassing. You respond by saying nothing. The rumor fades, but the memory stays. Historians still argue whether the inner politics of eunuchs were more vicious than those of the official court. Some claim it was all shadow play, strategic theater. Others insist the silent wars shaped policy more than any minister ever could. You begin to see patterns. Who talks to whom? Who enters the empress's quarters unannounced? Who leaves the library at midnight? You learn to read a room like a map, measuring tension by the set of a jaw, the placement of a teacup, and then the poison plot. It's never officially confirmed, but you hear the whispers a minor official falls ill after a banquet. A rare herb found in his dessert. The empress is furious, mostly about the scandal. An investigation begins, quietly. You're questioned along with 24 others. No one's arrested. No one's cleared. But second silence is suddenly reassigned to a post in a distant temple. You don't ask why. There's a fringe belief passed around during this time: never sit on a cushion that's warm. It means someone else was just there, possibly waiting for you, possibly leaving something behind. You start carrying your own cushion. At night, your dreams change. No longer peaceful walks in garden pavilions. Now it's corridors that shift beneath your feet, masks that won't come off, a bowl of soup that refills no matter how many times you drink. You write less in your journal. You speak less to plum ink. You begin spending more time in the hall of clear reflection, a quiet chamber where eunuchs sometimes go to pray, meditate, or just escape the noise of ambition. One evening, you find a note tucked under your mat. No signature. Just 3 characters. Trust, no teacup. You burn it, carefully. And yet, amid the tension, you find moments of strange clarity. A junior eunuch thanks you for defending him in a meeting. A concubine requests your assistance directly. A minister, one who once sneered at you, asks for your advice on banquet seating. You're not untouchable, but you are respected. Even feared a little, and that fear is useful. Still, you never let your guard down, because in the Forbidden City, today's ally is tomorrow's anecdote, and the line between a silk robe and a burial shroud is thinner than a hair. Plum ink leaves a rice cake by your mat the next morning. No one's tried to kill you this week, he says. Progress. You almost smile. Almost. The morning air smells faintly of wood smoke and plum blossoms, but today the palace feels unusually quiet. Not tense, not ominous, just expectant. You feel it in the way the eunuch's footsteps echo a little sharper, how the musicians in the southern garden pause a beat too long between notes. You've just been summoned to the pavilion of painted fans. This is no office, no archive, no prayer hall. It's a theater. And it's time for you to meet a different kind of power. The pavilion is where the court goes to be entertained. Opera, dance, puppet shows, performances written to honor the ancestors or flatter the emperor, or sometimes to slip in a political message behind a curtain of symbolism. And guess who's helping organize tonight's show? That's right, you. You're not the star, obviously, but you've been tasked with coordinating props, cueing musicians, and making sure the right officials sit in the right order. Because if the Minister of Rights ends up in the back row, while the Minister of Agriculture gets front center, someone's going to cry, and it won't be the actor playing the moon's spirit. You've barely begun rearranging the seating cushions when you realize something strange. Half the performers are eunuchs. Turns out, many eunuchs trained in the arts. Not just for court entertainment, but as a way to find identity in a world that tries to erase yours. Singing, dancing, painting. Some even write operas. Melodramas packed with coded commentary about palace life, cleverly disguised in rhymed couplets and phoenix metaphors. One fringe tale claims that the famous opera, The Jade Ribbon's Lament, supposedly about a homesick goddess, was actually penned by a eunuch mourning his removal from court duty. The empress reportedly wept at the third act. Historians still debate whether she knew who wrote it. You meet one of the performers, a wary singer with haunting eyes named Petal Voice. He speaks in riddles, eats nothing but fruit, and can cry on cue. This role is based on you? He whispers during rehearsal. I'm not a moon priestess. You are if I say you are, he replies, adjusting his hairpin. That night's performance is elaborate. Lanterns glow like stars overhead. The emperor sits in shadow behind a screen, flanked by the empress and several favored concubines. Ministers murmur, eunuchs scurry. You crouch just out of sight, gripping a cue scroll and hoping Petal Voice doesn't forget the third stanza. He doesn't. He sings about loyalty and sacrifice, about duty that silences desire, about standing still while the world whirls by. The court listens. A few ministers shift, uncomfortable. You hear someone sniffle, and then applause. Later, behind the scenes, Petal Voice smirks. They clapped for me, but they heard you. You're not sure if he's praising you or warning you. The next morning, you're summoned again. Not to perform, but to assist in organizing a series of retirements. Not court ministers, eunuchs. It happens quietly. An old robe here, a new post in a distant temple there. Some go willingly, others not so much. You escort one, a frail man known only as Reed Whisper, to the departure gate. He's dressed neatly, holding a bamboo flute. He never plays. He pats your hand before leaving. Sing while you can, he says. The audience doesn't wait forever. That evening, you talk to Plum Inc. What happens to them? After. Some become monks. Some become beggars. Some just fade. Do they come back? Only as stories. It's a chilling thought that all your careful steps, your diplomacy, your silence, it can all end with a quiet reassignment and a name struck from the scrolls. So, you begin preparing, quietly. You start teaching a few juniors how to run scroll delivery. You let others take the credit once in a while. You pretend not to notice when your robe gets folded incorrectly. You even write down your daily duties, not for yourself, but in case someone else needs to learn. Because retirement isn't just exile. It's transformation. Some eunuchs reinvent themselves entirely. You hear about one who started a tea house, another who carved tiny jade animals for children, a third who became an opera critic and was famously booed for falling asleep during the Banquet of Clouds. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, your service is remembered. You catch glimpses of retired eunuchs returning for New Year's ceremonies. They wear plain robes, walk slowly, nod at those they recognize. Some bring gifts, scrolls, incense, candied lotus root. Others just stand quietly at the back, like ghosts invited to the party. You wonder if one day you'll be one of them. And you hope that when you return, someone, just one person, will nod and say, he used to be someone. The rain comes suddenly, soft at first, then with the force of a kitchen drum, drop down the stairs. You watch from a shaded corridor as eunuchs scurry to cover scrolls, guard silk from the splash, and chase one very confused crane back into the Imperial aviary. You're on your way to a tomb. Not to be buried, yet, but to inspect preparations for the Imperial memorial rites. It's a routine check, a task you've done before, and yet this time feels different. Maybe it's the smell of wet pine. Maybe it's the fact that the name engraved in the new stele is someone you knew. Old River Gate. A eunuch who once ran the night incense rotations has passed, quietly, without scandal, without song. His tomb is simple, as most eunuchs are, yet carefully placed within the cluster of other eunuch graves outside the palace walls. Not with the royals, of course, but not forgotten either. You kneel, bow 3 times, light a stick of incense. The smoke spirals up, as if trying to escape the whole situation. It makes you wonder, how are eunuchs remembered? Historians still argue whether their contributions were essential or parasitic. Heroes to the throne or leeches on its back. But the stones don't lie. There are thousands of them, each carved with names, titles, and occasionally, oddly specific accomplishments. Supervised 36,000 Imperial lanterns. Keeper of the Western Garden Gate, first to taste the Emperor's tofu. Some tombs include little offerings, a brush, a silk fan, a jade button, and then there are the tall tales. The stories that float above the facts, embroidered through the years like palace robes, after too many hands have touched them. You visit one tomb marked only Cloud Song. No one knows his real name. Legend says he could sing 4 octaves and once serenaded a concubine into a swoon so dramatic the emperor banned music for a month. Probably false. But someone still leaves fresh peonies at his grave. Another tale, Inkroot, who supposedly wrote an entire imperial memoir under a fake minister's name. The book became a classic. He got a minor plaque. Justice. And yet, some eunuchs are remembered with true reverence. Zheng He, the famed explorer, was a eunuch. He sailed the known world in massive treasure ships, representing imperial power to far-off kingdoms. His tomb, modest in comparison to his legacy, is visited by scholars, tourists, and admirers alike. A fringe belief you hear from a gravekeeper, some eunuchs request to be buried with blank scrolls, so their story can be written properly. He explains. You think about that. You wonder how yours would begin. You return to the city, boots muddy, mood unplaceable. In the archives, you stumble on a scroll listing ceremonial burial ranks for non-royal palace servants. Eunuchs get their own column. It's long and full of footnotes. You learn that burial status depends on court rank, years of service, and, curiously, personal conduct. Gentle demeanor is worth more points than flawless record keeping. Makes you chuckle, and there's a column for requested posthumous title. Some ask to be called loyal servant. Others, humble one. One simply put, no title, please, just flowers. You copy that one down. Plumink joins you that evening at the Moon Gate. He seems unusually pensive. You ever think about what they'll say about us? You shrug. That we folded robes and didn't die doing it? He smirks. Not bad. But maybe they'll say we made the palace work. Or that we overstepped. Probably both. And that's the truth, isn't it? You've served quietly and served boldly. You've bowed and you've schemed. You've carried incense and whispers, secrets and soup. Somewhere in the official records, your name might be mentioned once or twice. A line here, a footnote there, but in the margins, the hidden spaces, you are everywhere. You are the one who rerouted the emperor's tour to avoid a riot. The one who caught a mismatched robe before a sacred rite. The one who ensured the concubine's letter never reached the wrong hands. You're not famous, but you're remembered. Maybe not in stone, but in silence. It starts slowly like a kettle cooling on a hearth you forgot was hot. One morning, the emperor delays his appearance at court. The next week, a minister dares raise his voice during a report. Then, one by one, the eunuchs begin disappearing from the high posts you once thought untouchable. You feel it before anyone says it out loud. The long decline has begun. You've lived through the age of rising eunuch power. Now, you're witnessing its twilight. The Ming dynasty, for all its grandeur and dragon, embroidered decrees, is fraying at the edges. And with it, the influence of the men who once ruled from behind the curtain. It's not a single event. No rebellion. No massacre. Just the slow erosion of imperial certainty. New factions emerge. Reformist scholars, emboldened ministers, even monks with opinions no one asked for. They begin questioning the eunuchs' grip on court logistics, on ceremonial authority, on proximity to the emperor. One minister dares to present a scroll titled, "The Problem of Unclipped Influence." You don't need a scholar to explain who that's aimed at. Historians still argue whether eunuchs brought about their own fall through corruption, mismanagement, or simply outliving their usefulness. Others say it was inevitable dynasties rise and dynasties fall. Eunuchs, as part of the inner scaffolding fall with them. You begin to feel the shift in small ways. Fewer invitations, colder glances. The loss of privilege is so subtle, you almost don't notice at first, until suddenly, you're not attending morning rituals, but organizing broom audits. Plum Inc. is the first to say it aloud. We're ghosts, he mutters, watching a minister swagger through a gate once guarded by eunuchs. And they've started noticing the house is haunted. You smile, bitterly. We were always ghosts. Maybe, he shrugs, but we used to run the sciences. You still hold a position, technically, but it's ceremonial now, more appearance than influence. You smile, you nod, you shuffle scrolls that no longer matter. The juniors who once bowed now brush past you. One even calls you uncle. A fringe rumor surfaces. There's talk of cutting the palace's eunuch numbers in half. Not with a sword, mercifully, just with early retirements, quiet reassignments, and encouragements to move to outer posts. No one uses the word purge, but everyone hears it. Then comes the edict. The emperor, pressured by a new council of scholar officials, announces that certain eunuch offices will be dissolved. Effective immediately. A list is read. You're not on it. This is good. And also not. Because you know the ones left behind aren't spared. They're held up like relics. Or warnings. The palace feels different now. Colder. Rooms echo longer. Conversations hush when you enter. You're not feared. You're not hated. You're something worse. Outdated. Some eunuchs try to pivot. One opens a fortune, telling stall near the garden gate. Another reinvents himself as a calligraphy teacher. You consider your options. Teach junior etiquette. Plum Inc. suggests. Most of them barely bow. You grumble. Exactly. Someone's got to fix that. You nod, but the idea doesn't stick. Not yet. Instead, you begin sorting through your belongings. Old robes, scroll fragments, an inkstone shaped like a phoenix wing. You find the first brush you were ever given, the bristles warped from overuse. You don't throw it away. You visit the archives one last time. The same scrolls are there, the same silence, but now the dust settles faster and fewer feet disturb it. You run your fingers along the spines of documents you once guarded like treasure, and you realize the scrolls outlive you. But only if someone keeps reading them. You draft a short memo. Just a list, really. Scrolls worth preserving. You leave it on Iron Brush's desk, unsigned. He'll know it's yours. At night, you walk the empty halls. You know where the lanterns sputter? Where the floor creaks? You pass the Hall of Supreme Harmony, where once you knelt with trembling hands. Now you pass it with the slow dignity of someone who knows where all the dragons are carved, and which ones are chipped. Plum Inc. finds you in the courtyard of the broken pavilion, where exiles used to pace. He brings wine. Forbidden, of course. But no one's watching anymore. We had a good run, he says. You clink cups. We were the run. Later, lying on your mat, you stare at the ceiling and whisper an old operatic line. Even the phoenix must molt. The empire changes. The throne persists. The names fade. But you, silk-shoed, silent, sharp, you were once one of the quiet architects of history. And even if the next chapter forgets your name, it can't erase your echo. Your joints crack louder than your slippers these days, and your morning bow takes a beat longer than it used to. The palace keeps turning, just as it always has, but you, like the sound of rain on old tiles, are starting to fade from its rhythm. You've met him once already. The boy, sun yachting. China's final Imperial eunuch. He's not even 12 when they bring him through the red gate. A quiet boy, eyes too big for his thin face, already dressed in robes too neat, too ceremonial. You watch from a shaded corridor as the old master of ceremonies bows and begins the familiar welcome script. You know that script by heart. You lived it. But watching him, you don't feel nostalgia. You feel grief. The dynasty is done. The Qing throne has abdicated. The Forbidden City isn't a palace anymore. It's a living museum with royal shadows wandering the halls, like dreams no one wants to wake from. And yet, Here is Sun Yachting undergoing the ancient operation to serve a throne that no longer rules. Historians still argue why his family allowed it. Poverty, tradition, the ghost of a promise that he might one day be powerful. Regardless, the result is the same: he becomes the last of you. The final name on a long, dwindling list. You're one of the few old eunuchs left in the city. Most have died, drifted away, or vanished into quiet temples. You remain, half out of duty, half because you no longer know any other home. You speak to him, once years later. He's maybe 17 then. Assigned briefly to the same outer pavilion, you now sweep more than supervise. You share a pot of tea on a cold morning. He's polite, guarded, and clearly terrified of saying the wrong thing. You say, "This place used to sing. Now it hums." He nods. It still sings in some corners. You smile. Just be careful where you hum. He doesn't laugh, but his eyes crinkle. You see the path he's walking. It's not yours. Not quite. But close enough to make your heart ache. There's a fringe story he tells you years later, after the war, after the palace opens to tourists. He says that once, a visitor asked him, "Where did the emperor bathe?" And he responded without thinking, in worry, "You're not sure if he made it up. Doesn't matter. It's true either way." By now, the tourists have started trickling in. They gawk at the dragon thrones, the gold inlays, the echo stones. Some point at the eunuchs who remain, real or rumored, and whisper you're one of them now. A curiosity. An artifact. The young guides call you Master Chen. Though that was never your name, you don't correct them. Names, like posts, are transient. What matters is presence. Sometimes, a visitor will ask you what it was like. You usually say nothing, but once, just once, you answer. You tell them, "It was like being the ink in the brush. Never seen, but always there." They don't understand. That's fine. You weren't talking to them, really. Sun Yachting eventually becomes famous. Not during his youth, but much later. He gives interviews, writes a book. People are shocked. Eunuchs still exist. As if you weren't right here the whole time. He becomes a symbol, a relic. A story wrapped in robes and old size. You watch him age. You visit him once, in his last home, where he lives alone with dusty furniture and more memories than visitors. "I remember you," he says. "You smelled like star anise." You laugh. "That was the kitchen. I just stole the scent." Before you leave, he says something that stays with you. "We weren't just servants. We were thread." You nod. "We held the seams." When he dies, the newspapers call him the last eunuch. They mean well, but they miss the point. He wasn't the last. He was the echo of a whisper no one else bothered to hear. And you? You're the silence after. These days, no one bows anymore. Not out of disrespect, necessarily, just irrelevance. The halls of the forbidden city still gleam. The courtyards still echo with birdsong. And tourists shuffle past the marble balustrades, snapping photos of dragon heads and jade lions. But the rhythm is different now. You walk alone most mornings, tracing routes you once patrolled with silent precision. The palace is a monument now. A place for school trips and wedding photos, not secrets and ceremonies. You pass the old kitchen. It smells like disinfectant. You peer into the archives. They're sealed, their contents digitized, boxed, forgotten. You peek through the carved window screens of the Emperor's chamber. A tour guide points at the bed and says, "This is where the Son of Heaven slept." The crowd murmurs. Someone drops a candy wrapper. You don't correct them. You just smile. Somehow, you've outlived the role, not just yours, but all of them. The scribe, the robe folder, the incense carrier, the whisper of weather signs. They're ghosts now, stitched into the silk of history, but worn smooth by time. You sit sometimes in the corner of the garden pavilion, the one with the lotus pond that never quite blooms. It's a quiet spot. You remember when it wasn't. You think about the ones who came before you, the ones who slipped scrolls under doors, who sang opera in the shade of the East Gate, who argued about tea temperature and moon calendars, and which robe would best flatter the emperor's mood swings. You remember Plum Ink? He left one winter and never returned. Word is he joined a monastery. You hope he did. You hope he found peace, or at least warmer robes. You remember Petal Voice, the opera singer. You once heard his voice echo off the stone, even when the courtyard was empty. For years after, you'd turn around whenever you heard a note float through the air, certain it was him. And you remember the emperor, not as a god, as a man. A tired one, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, but always alone, much like yourself. You don't dwell on it. Nostalgia is a slippery staircase, too easy to fall into. Instead, you keep your habits. You walk. You observe. You maintain the silence that once gave your work such weight. Once, a university student asks you, "Were you really a eunuch?" You smile. Still am, technically. They flush awkward. You pat their shoulder. Don't worry. I won't quiz you on ancient etiquette. Sometimes you help out unofficially. A confused guide, a dropped fan, a misaligned robe in a museum display. You correct it gently, silently, like brushing lint off an old friend's sleeve. You find peace in small acts. Straightening scrolls in the gift shop. Whispering blessings to birds that nest in the eaves. Sitting by the koi pond with your back straight, as if someone important might pass by any moment. No one does. But you're ready anyway. A fringe tale you once heard comes back to you now, softened by time. Some believe that every eunuch's soul, upon death, passes into a courtyard bell. Not to ring loudly, but to vibrate gently whenever truth is spoken nearby. You think that's a lovely idea. And maybe, just maybe, it's true. The light in the forbidden city fades slowly. Long shadows stretching across the stone courtyards, like memories refusing to settle. The tourists have gone. The lanterns flicker, then dim, leaving only the hush of wind brushing tile and the distant chirp of night insects. You sit one last time by the edge of the lotus pond, the water dark and still. Overhead, the stars peek out, shy behind the city's glow, and the moon hangs like a polished coin forgotten on a silk sheet. It's quiet, not empty, never empty, just at peace. You take a long, slow breath, let it out. The air smells faintly of old wood, steamed rice, and the dust of centuries. A scent you've come to know as home. You think of the scrolls left unrolled, the songs unsung, the whispered conversations that once swirled in these halls like incense. Gone, maybe, but not lost. Because even now, in this stillness, you carry it all. The footsteps, the secrets, the ceremonies, the service. And though the palace may one day crumble, though names may fade from stone and silk alike, your presence, soft, unseen, steady, remains. In the rhythm of the wind through a painted screen, in the hush before a performance begins, in the bow of a shadow that no one else remembers. You close your eyes. You are home.